Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going into the A-frame cabin. The main appeal of this build style is it's typically pretty cheap to produce, which is also true for The Sims. It's a fairly small footprint and a lot of roof pieces are used, which are free. They're extremely versatile. You can make them up into pretty much any style you want. I mean, it's a triangle. Just dress it up, dress it down, it's going to look great. And you can build this with pretty much any pack. The end result I will be uploading will just be base game, but if you're looking for a build challenge or you're not sure what to build with the new pack you just bought, try putting together an A-frame and use as many items as you can. You might be surprised at how much you like the results. Like the triangle in general, the A-frame is incredibly versatile and can be remixed and redecorated to fit in pretty much anywhere. The A-frame, believe it or not, got its name from the A-shaped framing, aka it's a triangle. Typically equilateral, but there's some room on that. The first true A-frame cabin didn't come to the US until 1934, and it reached its peak popularity in the States around the 70s, but triangular-shaped residential structures have been used around the world since pretty much forever. Whether that be more temporary housing such as tents, or more permanent housing like lean-tos and eventually full-on structured homes, it's just a very classic shape. Now, angled walls can make for some difficult living in real life as well as The Sims, but I'm going to give you a few ways to address that and use it to your advantage today. We'll also be talking about skylights and customizable lofts. I'm pretty excited for this one, although I am quite tired, so it is a low energy video, but don't let that fool you. This is an epic build and you are going to love it. I am starting out on a 64 by 64 lot today because it's pretty and I want to. I'm going to start off by showing you the very basics of how to create like a super small A-frame, how to make it larger and larger, how to add on to the sides, and after we get all the basics, like the very basic construction elements out of the way, I'll talk about customizing your loft area, opening up the roof, and accessing under roof areas, a really cool way that I like to do skylights even if it does mess up the lighting inside the build, terrain manipulation, just like fancy stuff. So for starters, the A-frame is ridiculously simple. You can make anything complicated if you want, but you can literally just make an A-frame out of a gable roof. This is totally playable. It's going to give you about 3 tiles worth from about this half tile mark here to this half tile mark here of playable space. You can of course make this larger, and the most classic A-frame sort of pitch is going to give this a fairly equilateral feel, about 60 degrees. I don't have my protractor, so I don't know exactly what this is, but we're guessing about 60. Make this as big or small as you want, and you have a free house. Very cool. However, most of us like to have some actual rooms, so let's do that. I have a 6 by 10 rectangle here. You can use whatever wall height you want. I'm going to start with short because the next step is to place a half gable on either side. By default, this half gable pitch will line up exactly with the short wall height, which is super handy. However, it also makes your A-frame quite stubby, which maybe you want. Totally fine, give it more of like a pyramid shape. However, again, typically the angle creates a more equilateral triangle, so to get that, select your half gable roof piece, hold Alt, and just push it in one tile. That will keep the height the same, and then adjust your gable at the top as well. You can remove the ceiling from this portion of the room and use a flat square to create a loft that will just be directly in the roof space. This looks a little funky because I'm so zoomed out so you can see, but this will be like, this is your rectangle here, and then you can add a ladder or stairs to get up into this loft space. You'll have, I get about 3.5, 4 tiles of playable space side to side, as well as however deep you make this loft, and that way you don't actually have to add a second story. While you're building, you will have to work on this level with all the walls down, but when you're actually playing the game, half walls should still show you the lofted space. You can go ahead and add a ladder, fence bits, although be aware that they may stick out of the roof. The stairs for this particular layout won't work super great, just because they'll stick so far out into your main living area, even if you do a switchback, but that's how you could sort of create a single level A-frame with a loft. To expand vertically, you're going to want to make a slightly wider base. I have a 9 by 10 rectangle here, and then on the floor above, I'm going to keep sticking with the short wall height for this one, by the way. I'll get to that in a second, but for short wall height, you're going to draw in 2 tiles from either side, and then you can place those very same half gable pieces on both the ground level and the sides of your second level. There we go. Sorry, I was having some trouble there. Of course, top it off with your gable, and now you have a 2-story with still the possibility of having a loft up above. And if you want a loft in this area, all you'll have to do is draw a little bit of a half wall and delete the floor on one side. If I recolor the floor, it's a little easier to see how this lofted space sort of works. And you can do the same thing on top of the second story and remove the ceilings of those rooms to be able to see all the way up into the peak of the roof. You can just keep copying this same method where you make your base level wider and wider and wider, keep adding stories on top, going in an equal number of tiles every time, and you could end up with a really massive triangle this way. If you want to expand horizontally, you can do that. You don't want to go too crazy because the main charm of this shape is simply that it is a triangle. But if for whatever reason that's not working for you, or you need more space without going up, you can add a bit of a rectangle coming out one side or the other. You won't want quite the same steep pitch on this roof piece, just something that will cover it nicely and blend into the roof of the rest of the build will work fine. You can even do this on the second level, which would act almost like a dormer. You will want to make sure that you have your 2 half gable pieces on either side though, and pull those eaves in so that they don't clip in. Otherwise the roof will show into your build because of this open space here. So we'll want to make sure we keep those roofs tucked in. If you're having issues with roofs clipping into your build, I highly recommend checking out this video, which goes over, well, roofs clipping in. So that's sort of how that would look coming off the side. This can be a nice option here and there for a little bit more floor space, upstairs office space, something like that. But for the most part, you want the vast majority of your build to be contained in a triangle like this. What if you want your walls to be a little taller? Totally fine. The main thing you want to watch out for is making sure the corner of this wall, this section right here, lines up as exactly as possible with the edge of your roof. So here the roof is above it just a smidge. All that's going to do is increase the likelihood of clipping issues. You may need to hold Alt to get the pitch more exact, but eventually you'll get it, and then you can just copy that same roof piece on the other side of your build, add your gable, and make sure that that pitch lines up. To finish up with the basics part, let's talk about how to roof, side, door, and window these builds, as well as a quick introduction to the most basic format, as it were, of interior layout. However you roof your build is going to reflect the world around you. If you're building an A-frame in a cottage-filled world, go for something thatched. If you want it to feel a little bit more modern, maybe not pink, but metal siding, a pink scallop for storybook, concrete for something super modern, or shingles for your just basic everyday A-frame. Same kind of thing goes for siding. If you wanted it to feel super rustic, you could go for something like this, which will almost give a log feel. Stones and bricks, paneling, shingles, literally nothing is off limits. You can make an A-frame in pretty much any style. As far as doors and windows, unless you're planning on adding skylights, which I'll get to in a second, you're going to want to add as many windows as you can on these flat walls, which means the bathrooms will probably not be along these walls. Again, go with whatever door sort of suits your style, but you're probably going to want to stick with something with a fair amount of glass in it. I could go for sort of a wall of windows feel like this, something much more modern. If you have the Moschino pack, you could probably do something pretty cool with some of these funky window shapes as well. I really wish wood tones matched better, but this is what I'm going to go with for now at least. Something a little more on the rustic side. And let's talk about some layout. I'm starting here because you're going to want whatever wall you may have on the first floor to line up more or less with the loft. You don't want it floating out here, that's just gonna look silly. You don't have to keep this whole wall, I just find it's handy to start with a wall like this and then decide how else I want my build to be laid out. I think I'll add a little bathroom here, probably do dining here, and then a kitchen around the back. Now that I know my general layout, I can open up sort of an arch here, but still have plenty of room for stairs, tuck a ladder around this corner here. Inside, you're going to see, for the most part, a lot of wood. Wood floors, wood paneling. Personally, I find this amount of wood gets really overwhelming, but if you really want to stick with that classic 70s rustic camping vibe, stick with the paneling. I guess it kinda looks cool. You may want to throw down some tiles for your bathroom and kitchen, just really beige it up in here. Don't forget to add doors and windows to that back wall as well, and that is a very basic overview of how to actually pull together an A-frame cabin. I do want to show you how to add some cool skylights and do custom lofts though, because those two things can be super handy in this build. However, they are going to most likely mess with your lighting, as well as provide a few more opportunities for glitching, so keep that in mind. I'm going to start with the custom loft because, in my opinion, it's probably the most sort of universal thing that you can do to any build. I'm going to start by getting rid of my ladder, and honestly this whole floor. Roof pieces and all. I'm gonna move this one right now so we don't have the shadow. Alright, so what we want to start by doing is remove the ceiling from the floor below. Don't worry about the bathroom, we're going to cover that up anyway. Next, I'm going to take a flat square and place this where I want my lofted area to be. I am pulling all the way to the edges of the roof because I want to show you how to sort of create an accessible under roof area. One of the advantages of doing this is not only can you add that under roof portion, but you can also add a little bit of an extension to one side or the other, and shift page down to move the grid, by the way. You can actually add stairs this way that will not really interfere with the rest of your loft space. Like the ladder before was cutting into it, now we have this whole rectangle all to ourselves. If you want to just wall this portion off, you can do that easily enough. Just make sure to stay 2 tiles in from the edge. And now you're going to end up with essentially the same look as we just had. You just have a better loft, and this area is no longer a room. Before, if you clicked on this, it would be a room. Now it's not. Again, it might mess with your lighting a little bit, but being able to actually have a more custom shape and not worry about clicking on a room here, I think it's worth it. However, today, for the skylights and under the roof sort of thing, you're only going to draw the walls on the ends 2 tiles in from the edge of the floor below. So like this. And then you're going to copy this roof piece and shrink it down so that it is only 1 tile wide on the one side and the other, kind of like bookends. If you want this wall to feel more natural, you could add a fireplace that would have like a chimney that you could pretend was coming up through this roof piece. You could add columns, you could just pretend it doesn't exist, lots of options. But what this is going to let us do is hold shift and actually extend this eave and extend this one over to meet up. And now you have not 100% playable, you can only get into about the first tile, but more playable space, more open space for screenshots and stuff like that. These roof pieces will be painted whatever the outside of your build is painted, so you also want to keep that in mind. But again, you actually get to see under the roof, so that's kind of cool. The other thing that this allows you to do is actually add skylights that more or less look like they belong. So I'm going to start out with non-adjusted pieces on either side like this, and I want a nice wide skylight shining right down into my living room. So I'm also going to copy this roof piece and place it here. And now what I'm going to do is pull this eave in by holding shift, pull this eave out to meet up with this one again by holding shift, and then hold shift one last time to bring this eave out and actually cover up this whole original roof piece. Now if I add glass to my middle roof piece and pitch it down by holding Alt ever so slightly, I'm also going to make sure that I pull in these eaves. But that is going to give me a skylight that is open on the edge like this. That is different to your typical skylight, which would still have this wall piece. Ours does not. That is the appeal. That is what I'm so hyped up about, is just not having this wall. It does mess with the lighting, but I don't care. So decide for yourselves whether you care or not, I guess. And of course you can page up, you'll have a bit of a grid here that you can align your top roof piece to. I failed. There we go. And if I put my windows back, how cool does that look? You can mess with these eaves a little bit to try and get the shingles to match up a little bit better. It's kind of going to depend on what roof texture you pick, how much this is going to be an issue. Here's what that skylight's going to look like from the inside. Again, you could add walls or columns or whatever below this if you didn't want it to look quite so awkward. You could potentially even stack these roof pieces one on top of another, but the eaves do have limits on how far they can extend, so keep that in mind. There's going to be a little bit of a gap here. It's a Sims 4, we do have some limitations, but just look at that sunset light coming in. Is that not beautiful? Alright, let's talk about decks and foundations. If you want to add a deck, it's literally as easy as placing a floor, and then you can hold shift to extend these eaves out to sort of cover it up. That gives it a little bit of Scandinavian flair and honestly just looks cool. Now, if you want to raise your build on a foundation, I'm doing a high one for extra demonstrative purposes, you're going to have a couple of issues. The first one is you're going to see your roof kind of floats off the side. There are a couple of ways to fix this. You can either extend this sort of deck piece around to give your roof pieces something to sit on, or you can change the terrain. We're going to talk about terrain in just a second, so let's finish up with the foundation example. You can then use something that doesn't have that lip on it, and then hold shift again and sort of extend this eave the rest of the way into the ground, and just put a bush there or something. Another really common foundation type would actually be stilts. But what about terrain? When it comes down to landscaping and terrain, the A-frame is pretty much always going to be in some sort of wilderness setting. So if you really want to give it that woodsy feel and add some hills and whatever, the easiest way to do that is to actually build your A-frame first, so you don't have to worry about terrain too much. Lift it up on a foundation however high you want it to be on the hill, and then use your flatten terrain tool, this one, not this one, this one, and start on the floor somewhere of your build. This is immediately going to give you a hill, which is super fun. You can then smooth out a little path to walk up to it, raise up some other areas to give it more of a mountain feel, maybe add a pond. I really like how this looks, and I'm going to try to get this onto a smaller lot for you guys so that you can download it and look at it even if you don't have a world that has a 64 lot. But I might see if I can't get at least on a 30 by 40 to keep some of this terrain. because it turned out surprisingly well. If you want your water to look like it's sort of originating somewhere, you can throw down a couple of bushes. I think I have move objects turned on right now. I do. But if you add some bushes, it's just sort of automatically going to look like it's kind of flowing out of there. As long as we're placing some plants, let's talk a little bit more about landscaping. As always, landscaping should reflect the world around you. If you're building in a forest, add some foresty trees. You can use the bracket keys to scale up and down some of your trees to give yourself a little bit more variation. You can pay attention to the trees around you to know if you should use deciduous, coniferous, or a combination. Ground cover, typically you're going to want something a little bit more unkempt and shrubby, like unkempt shrubbery. It's a good excuse to use some of this green grass, the wild grass, and just more sort of wild looking flowers, like wildflowers. Mix and match to your heart's content, build it out. I'm going to change lots before I finish it, just so I can make sure whatever I do here is going to be accurate to what you guys actually find in the gallery. Adding terrain paint under your ponds is just as important as adding it under everything else. And don't forget you can change watercolors here. If you want to add a terrain paint path, I recommend going through and painting with some dirt first, and then lowering the softness to grab your path material, probably even drop down the size of your paintbrush as well. And what this is going to do is help it have a blended edge, and it's just going to look a lot better than if you just put it straight on the ground. Alternatively, you could paint it and then go through with your dirt at a very soft, fairly small setting and sort of blur the edges. It can also be fun to make the path look more muddy by adding a little bit more dirt on top of it. And don't forget to add terrain paint under your foundations, plants, and any other structures you may have. Guess I should probably add stairs back here, huh? That feels a little safer. Let's do a quick little recap. The A-frame is named for its A-shaped framing. Whatever dimensions you have on your ground floor, you're going to want to shrink by usually about 2 tiles on the floor above. This is so that you have room to place roof pieces on either side. I've done a bit of a funky roofing technique here. You can just, of course, put normal roof there as well. Having high ceilings and lofted spaces are definitely staples of the A-frame style, and I've given you a couple of ways to accomplish that today. Siding and roof texture can really be pretty much whatever. Look to the world around you for inspiration, consider whether this is a glamping cottage or just a normal camping cottage, or even a year-round residence. It is pretty common for these to be set in more wooded areas, so if you want to play around with terrain manipulation, this is a great build to do it with. As tempted as I am to just make a full-on glam A-frame right now, I do have some other stuff I have to take care of, so I'm going to leave you guys here. Hopefully you enjoyed this A-frame tutorial. I really encourage you to try messing around with the terrain tools. This is a great build to do it with because it's so often put in extremely rural and wilderness settings, so even if you have a bunch of random cliff faces, it's still going to look great. If you're keen on checking out more of this series, I highly recommend checking out the playlist on the top card, which is the whole Building Like a Nerd series, and if you want to see more roofing tips, this build involved a lot of roofs, so it felt fitting to put this playlist in as well. You can check out this playlist of I think 32 different roofing videos. I do a lot of stuff about roofing, so if you're interested in learning more about roofing, that's a great playlist. You should check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already, like the video if you made it this far, and I look forward to building you the guys tomorrow. Bye!